Dan Trudeau here. I'm the VP and Executive Recruiter at PRA USA, and today I want to talk to you a bit about the EV, electric vehicle market, where it stands today and where it could be heading. Now, PRA USA is a Detroit area firm, so we've been heavily involved with automotive technologies throughout our entire 30-year history. We've been on the inside to watch the development of electrical vehicle technologies for a couple decades now, and it's a particularly exciting time to be involved in this field. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen a big investment in this area, but it feels different this time around. And let me explain why. Right after the last recession, we were taking a lot of meetings with companies that needed to bring people in the door because they were starting new EV groups, or new battery systems groups, or there were new joint ventures from companies that had never gone into that before. Just a ton of investment going into this technology because of the excitement it brought to the field. Flash forward a couple years later, almost all those divisions, companies, joint ventures were gone. There were still a couple left in the field and they became the real players, but unfortunately these companies had overestimated the size of the electric vehicle and hybrid electric vehicle market at that time. So the question is, what's different this time? This time there's more of a real investment from even traditional car makers through to the up-and-coming companies. In other words, it's across the board, and the plans seem much more long-term and firm. So it's not just the Teslas and Rivians of the world, it's the Toyotas, the GMs, the Fords, the Chryslers. I was recently on a conference call through the SAE, the Society of Automotive Engineers, where the heads of Ford, Chrysler, Navistar were all talking about the level of investment they have and the level of commitment they have to these vehicles, which was well beyond anything I had heard before. Ford was even talking about having at least a hybrid or EV version of every single one of their cars. So it's a lot different now. Now, the complication to this is the current crisis we're in right now and the question of how it's affected things. I mean, it's been a huge disruptor across the board for all businesses, but what does it mean for EV development and EV markets? And that's what I want to talk about today. In terms of the big challenges or barriers to widespread EV adoption right now, there are three things that are keeping EVs from becoming as big as they could be today. And those things are cost, range, and infrastructure. Now, in terms of cost, it's pretty much common knowledge that electric vehicles in any variety, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, etc., are more expensive up front than a conventional car. Even with government programs that are offsetting some of that to encourage adoption, they just cost more money up front. Now, the good news on that one is because of the increase in scale and a lot of the innovations that have happened the last handful of years, they expect price parity, in other words, EV and conventional vehicles, to be around the same amount of money by 2025, 2027, which is great news because it's really not that far away in terms of development years. Now, in terms of range, this is a tough one. Let's take the standard bearer here, which is Tesla. Their Model S has an ideal range of 375 miles. The Model 3 has an ideal range of around 348 miles, and a lot of the other EVs have an ideal range of around 200 miles. Now, you'll note I'm saying ideal range here. And the reason I'm saying that is because this is their predicted ideal range. The actual, in the real world, on the road range is probably shorter than that. This is a big issue because if you're just doing commuting around your local area or short drives or things like that, that's fine. It's no big deal. You do your driving for the day, you plug in, you're good. For people who are going to do a lot of heavy driving or need to take a road trip or anything like that, it makes the cars not practical. Now you can say, but wait a minute, if I take that long of a drive, I'm going to run out of gas and refill. What's the difference? Well, refilling your tank, can take up to 5 minutes. Recharging your car will take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. So that's how much you're adding to whatever trip you're taking if you're driving an electric vehicle. So this is a big issue right now. Now they're developing several new technologies to charge as you go, but a lot of these are still in their infancy yet. They're not practical solutions yet. So this is a big hurdle to get past. The next one is infrastructure. Right now, in the United States, there's about 13,000 charging stations, which sounds like a lot, but just think of how many gas stations there are, and that shows you how small that is. And not only that, they're not evenly distributed. There are some parts of the country where you can go 4750 miles between EV charging stations. So, even if you want to spend that 4 to 8 hours to recharge, in a lot of places, there are not a lot of great options for it. Now, this is something that they're investing heavily in. They're coming a long way. But again, it's another stumbling block, another challenge that we have to get over in the next few years. So in summary, the cost looks like a short-term problem. Infrastructure and range are proving far trickier. So let's talk about some of the areas where EVs have been very successful in the last 5-6 years leading to today. First off, since 2015, the EV market has grown on average 41% per year. There are a few markets where you can get that sort of growth, so again, a very positive sign. And to get an idea of what that means just in terms of like the amount of EVs out there, we can look at China, which is the number one, consumer of EVs in the world, just in terms of volume. Norway has the highest percentage of EVs on the road, but China is the biggest buyer of them. Now, in 2014, 60,000 EVs were sold in China. Just back in 2018, that number was up to about 1,100,000. So you just see in that short 4-year period the explosive growth of EVs in that market. And in the same time period, 2014 to 2018, the worldwide EV fleet, the number of EVs out there on the road, went from just under 1 million to just over 9 million. So again, very impressive. And they're looking at 23 to 43 million, depending on who you ask, EVs on the road by 2030. So you can see a lot of this recent optimism and investment is fueled by real growth numbers. So things were looking really positive coming into 2020. They expected the upward trends to continue, the gains in market share, the gains in sales, and then the COVID crisis hit, with the resulting economic fallout, which, as you might anticipate, really hammered the automakers all down the line. So the question is, what is both the short and long-term effects of this crisis in terms of the growth of EVs? Now, this year they are anticipating selling 1.7 million less electric vehicles than they did last year, which is an 18% decline, which not great by any standard. On the other hand, conventional vehicles are expected to decline in sales by 23%. So EVs, in a way, are actually getting hit less than conventional vehicles. And on top of that, the automakers and investors are all talking about how they're expecting their investment in R&D of EVs to remain stable, maybe a little less, but definitely not the sort of cut you might expect. Instead, the cuts are going to be delivered to things like conventional powertrain development and another hot area recently, autonomous driving. They're expecting autonomous driving to actually get a much bigger setback than electric vehicles. So, it's not positive, but long term, what they're saying is they're not going to let this be something that pulls back their goals for EVs. The development will continue, the investment will continue. Beyond the short and long-term prospects of the overall EV market, there's also the question about what are the prospects for those who are either making their careers in the field or looking to make their careers in the field. Just like what we talked about previously, we're looking at some short-term pain with long-term gain. As I mentioned, a lot of the major automakers, a lot of the big players in the field are looking to either not cut their budgets in terms of investing in these technologies or to cut it very little. But in addition to them, there's also a whole world of smaller startup type companies that employ a lot of skilled people in the field who may not have the funds to make it through or the investors to make it through. There's a very real prospect that a lot of those companies are going to go out of business, be consolidated, bought, etc., which will lead to the inevitable letting people go. Now, even though those people have skills that are still very much in demand, The hiring process right now, again, given the economic fallout of this crisis, is very slow. People are not going to be able to turn around and just, boom, I got a new job. I mean, there might be some instances, but overall, it's going to be a slow process, especially for people who are still in the immigration process on their visas and etc. It's going to be even slower for them. And again, there's a real threat in that too, because there's been a lot of talk about halting visa programs and maybe pushing back on some of this stuff again because it's in crisis right now. But if these engineers, if these professionals can't turn around and get new positions, they're going to have to leave, taking their skills, taking their knowledge with them, and in a lot of cases, maybe even taking the work with them, because if it can't get done here, it's still got to get done. That's a real risk in the short term. Now, over the long term, we expect electrical vehicle development to be one of the most robust, growing parts of the technology economy. We expect to still do a lot of work in this area, and if you've got skills in areas like embedded controls development, power electronics, mechatronic systems design, system packaging, things like that, there's still going to be a lot of demand for your skills going into the years ahead, and we don't see the pool of candidates getting that much deeper. Therefore, it's still going to be high demand, low supply, very good for you if you're working in that area. So overall, we'd say again, short term, there's going to be some ugliness, there's going to be some struggle. Long term, things are looking very, very good. I hope you enjoyed the video, and remember to like, share, and subscribe to the PRA USA channel. We have 30 plus years of experience working with both the people developing technologies like this and the companies they work at. We have in the trenches knowledge that'll help you chart a successful path for yourself in the technology world.